Hello and welcome back to the Legendary Chiropractor Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Brent Janogan. Tonight we have Michael Smith, a future doctor of chiropractic. He is a second trimester student at Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa, which is known as the fountainhead of chiropractic. Michael, thanks for being with us tonight.
Hey, it's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump into a conversation tonight. We're going to talk about consistency. We're going to talk about overcoming adversity and failure as a student. We're going to talk about a little about habits. We're also going to be talking about some principles of failure and how to move past those and set yourself up for success. But before we hop in that conversation, let's hear from our amazing sponsors that allow this podcast to be possible.
Total Clinic Solutions is your go-to source for purchasing both brand new and refurbished chiropractic equipment, as well as phone support for repairs and maintenance. Call Derek and allow him to combine your wishes and his 23 years of chiropractic equipment expertise to find what's best for you and your patients at 704-622-4089 or head to TotalClinicSolutions.com now. True Chiro, helping chiropractors explode their practices and save more lives by shifting the perception of what they do from neck and low back pain to being about the brain and nervous system, leading to increased retention, more referrals, higher case averages, but most importantly, better patient outcomes for more than just neck and back pain. For more information, check out the link below, truechiro.org. Again, that's truechiro.org.
And welcome back to season 16, episode 11. Tonight, we have a future chiropractor, Michael Smith. Mike, how's it going, Bubba?
Hey, it's going good. Thanks for having me on here, Doc. And it's just, to anybody else that's listening, it's just an honor to be here. And we go back. Gosh, it's probably about a year and a half, um, and it's just so cool to just jump back. It's on page and just it's kind of like we picked up where we left off or whatever kind of thing.
Yeah, it's such an honor and privilege to have you on tonight. Like you said, it's been almost 2 years, and I've got to see you grow. From whenever you were in your bachelor's, and now you're in the DC program at Palmer, and you're working your way through that. And just tell us a little about your journey, because I know about it, but I want everyone to be able to hear about your journey. Where you come from, because you're such an extraordinary human being. You're on a weight loss journey. You're on a path of attunement for yourself. The hero's journey, as some call it. And just tell us a little about that and where you've come from.
Yeah, and we had prior to the call, we had talked about sometimes you have to do the work behind the scenes and to then go you do the work behind the scenes and then you go and you get to be on stage and that's really I used to be on the platform of social media pretty well um, about a year ago. And then I really just kind of shut that down because I had really two roads to go. And the road was to continue the social media stuff and all that, and then not become a doctor of chiropractic, or go down the road and become a doc. And I remember it was October 19th of 2019 when I was in Austin, Texas. And that's when the Lord called me to chiropractic. And so through that, it was a year of planning to come out here to Palmer. And now I'm out here. And my point is, I chose that road to become a doc. And when you make certain decisions in life, there's risk involved. And sometimes that includes shutting down a social media platform so you can, get to a different destination. And I'm excited because like this past year, I tell my mentors and friends a lot, everybody's probably have watched or seen Deal or No Deal.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's that you have the red button on the table, and then you have the clear box, and really it's the adversity that I've faced over the last year in the doctor's program. You know, in undergrad, I could skip classes, go and pass exams, and we're good. But this doctor's program really, I got handed a lot. You know, it was really tough. And so the point is, I started first trimester, and I didn't do really well. And the class that I started with, they're in fourth try, excuse me, and I'm in second try. You know, and so that just tells you the adversity that I faced. But the point, what I'm getting to, is to anybody that's watching this, or even Doc, you, is like, don't quit. Like, if you, everything in life is going to be extremely tough. It's going to test you and grow you. But here's the thing, you don't grow in your comfort zone. You know, when you're in your uncomfortable zone, I guess you want to call it, that's where you grow the most. And so back to the deal or no deal thing is like, that red button of like, hey, I pushed that button, I passed every exam, I didn't fail any classes, like I'm in fourth try with my buddies, and and life is good. And then there's that no deal, and I'm gonna say I would go no deal, because it taught me, you know, what this past year, you know, failing biochem twice, what it taught me. You know, this is one of the first times I've ever even mentioned failing a class online or on a podcast. But you know, here's the truth: is like, people need to understand, especially in podcasting and the social media world. We get on here and give a like a front that, like, hey, this is how life really is. But behind the scenes, you don't share that you failed at this. No, you know, I think we that I would definitely say, as men coming together, we need to be more raw, more, you know, you get what I'm saying, Doc?
Yeah. Well, you know, I heard something recently. It was your mess is your message. And
Yeah.
that really resonated with me. And I feel like that's kind of what you're trying to say there is, as we go through this adversity and as we go through it, sometimes we don't talk about the struggles or the challenges we face because, uh, you know, like for myself, raised up in an environment, it's like men don't cry, you know, rub
Right.
some dirt on it and, you know, keep going. You're going to be stronger. You know, take a knee, hydrate. That was one of the things in the Marine Corps we always used to laugh about. It's like, you know, you get shot in the leg, take a knee, hydrate, you know, take some Motrin, keep moving. And
Right.
that mentality isn't exactly the most positive, nor is it the most healthy mindset. And your mess is your message. Other people can learn through your adversity and through your challenges, and as you overcome those, what that looks like, the lessons you learn from those are the parts of the message that you carry through the mess, because that's
Right.
ultimately what you walk away from with it.
Yeah, and you know, to really just kind of finish my point is like, it's so important to just live out loud and just really just be honest and saying, hey, you know what, like, I decided to go on this thing called a journey of life, and I chose the chiropractic path, and I knew that there was gonna be some bumps in the road. I didn't know what those bumps were gonna be, but I knew they were gonna be there. And just the idea of saying, hey, you know what, I failed biochem, hey, it's okay. You know how many docs out there failed boards? You
Mm.
know, there's docs that super successful, multi-million dollar docs. I know a couple of them personally that, like, literally have told me, "Hey, Mike, it's okay that you failed. It doesn't matter. It's what the failure teaches you." And
Mm.
that's the point: is go out there and fail, like, fall forward. You know, Les Brown says, hey, if your life's gonna kick you, and you know, like, it's gonna kick you and you're gonna fall on your butt, but make sure you fall, like, on your butt to your back, because if you can look up, you can get up.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is just go out and fail. Like, why keep yourself in a box? You know, we live in a box, we talk on a box. You know, I'm recording this call on a box. You know, like, our mind is in a box. Like, stop living in a box, like, and just, like, break the box and, like, mentally just go to the next level. And the only way you do that is taking risk.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the imaging of a box, right? You put yourself in a box, and I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but Matthew McConaughey in his book Green Lights talks about a roof is a man-made thing, and that really resonated with me. It's like if you're born into a box, uh, example, a four-wall white room with a bunch of lights, then you're born into a box. When you go to school, you're in a four-room or four-wall room. That's
Yep.
you're taught, you're institutionalized in a box, and
Right.
you're taught to live in that box. You're taught to think in that box. You're taught to stay in that box. And whenever you get outside of that box, you realize there's so much outside of the box. Michael Singer in what was that book? He talked about that. There was a part of it in there. I'll have to think about the book. I can't think of it right now, but phenomenal book that he talks about. There's essentially light coming in the window of a house, and the house is your house. And as the light's coming in, you're wondering what's outside, but you're scared to go outside of the house
Right.
because it's outside of the box. And
Mm.
when you step outside, you learn there's a big bright world outside, and you don't have to live in that box, and you can get out and you can see what it's actually like and experience it.
Right. I can't remember the statistic, but I remember reading years ago, like, I want to say it was like 85%. It was a very high percentage of like the population will like they'll live their whole life in the city that they were born.
Mm-hmm.
Like, now think of that. Like, you, there are like just millions and millions of places to go around this world, and you stay at that same place. And then some people are like, yeah, I don't have the money for vacation, or we don't vacation, and it's like, in my opinion, I think it's you don't value it, and so you don't do it. Um, but it's just crazy how like they just stay in that box.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get out of the box. It's like more of a metaphor, but then it's a real thing. But if you go deep deep sea fishing, you have the crabs. They'll like drop the tanks into the ocean. The crabs will go in the crate tank, and um, they'll start pulling it up. And then the crabs that want to like exit the tank, they'll start trying to leave, and then the crabs will pull them back in. And that's exactly how people live their life. That's exactly how it is when somebody in your family says, "Hey, I'm gonna go to, I don't know, let's just say, from my example, I didn't have like the biggest fight in my family, but when I say, hey, I'm gonna leave the state, I'm gonna leave the city that I grew up in, and I'm gonna go to Davenport, Iowa, to do this doctor thing, and nobody in my family has ever done this crazy thing, and and I remember um, when I God called me down there that 2019, and I texted my brother and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna quit my job and become a chiropractor." And then I tell my mom and my stepdad, and they're all for it, and they're just like, "Dude, like you should have done that like years ago." And then I come to my dad, and he was that crab that tried to grab you and to keep you in. I did what very, very well financially in my previous career. And, you know, I mean, I made more money than my dad ever did. And I'm at that
Yeah.
time, uh, what is it, probably about 21 years old. And I'm doing more than my dad had ever did in 55 years of his life. And so when I go and tell him, hey, I'm doing this, he's like, you're an idiot. Why would you leave that much income? Like, you're
Mm.
doing so well. But it was kind of like that risk reward of like, yeah, I make a lot of money, but I'm spending a lot of time at work. And
Right.
I'm not fulfilled, and I don't see like a future in what I was doing. I was working at a psychiatric hospital in the nursing department, and those years taught me so much. And as I'm a student doctor, and when I'm able to get licensed, uh, all those years of working in the medical field there is going to transpire to what
Mm-hmm.
I'll do as a doc. But like, the point is like, man, it was so difficult with my father. Like it took probably 6 months to a year for him to really understand it. And so then I come out and then he starts to see the bigger idea. And then he's like, "Oh, that's what you're doing." But the point is, it takes time. That's
Yep.
principle number 6. Every process requires time. And so it's just adversity. When you're in the middle of it, it's not fun.
Mm-mm.
But man, you got to find joy in the journey. And when you find joy in the journey, and I don't know if the Lord's just working on me lately with this, but I hear it so often that it's like it's not the destination, it's the journey. And all the wealthy people, the big people that have done something with their life, they'll come back and kind of have a conversation similar to what we're doing, and they give that input of like, hey, like enjoy the journey,
Mm-hmm.
because when you get to your destination, you're not there that long. You're always going to a different destination.
Yep.
You know, yeah,
And and that's such. It sounds so cliche. And having just recently graduated from chiropractic school at Life University, I've been a licensed doctor now for a little over 2 months, going in my third month. And I can tell you the journey of becoming a chiropractor, going through chiropractic school, it's not easy. It's one of the hardest accomplishments I've ever done. And I'm so grateful for the experience, the exposure it gave me. I was exposed to a massive amount of diversity for people as humans, but also in technique, as in chiropractic, philosophically, and that allowed me to make the best decisions and the best choices that would lead me to the path that I'm on. And everyone's on their own path. And when you're going through school, you have people that they come in and they have a vision, right? They're like, I'm going to be a Gonstead doctor. That's what
right,
I will be. I'm like, yeah, you think that. Like some people do. Now some people do, and you go through school, and like for me, I did a bunch of different techniques because I wanted variety. I wanted a lot to be able to offer to people and have a big toolbox and a lot of tools in that toolbox to be able to pull out different things whenever it was needed. And some people don't want that. They want one thing and that's all they want to focus on. They want to be a master of that one discipline. And I respect that. Upper cervical docs, I respect upper cervical specific because they dedicate their entire craft to adjusting one or two bones.
right,
And they're phenomenal at that. And then you have other doctors that more mechanistic, and they're mixers or they use Thompson or whatever. It's such a beautiful conversation, but you have to enjoy the journey. You have to enjoy the exposure. Everyone's so wrapped up on finishing chiropractic school, but whenever you get done, then what? You know,
right.
the vision is
That kind of reminds me of another thing. We had mentioned is consistency. You look at an upper cervical doc, like they will consistently outrun you, like any day of the week, especially in school. Like, at least that's what I see. Or those people that are like the gondroids, but they're so like, they're, they drink the Kool-Aid. They're all in,
mm-hmm,
and they're literally consistent of how do I get better and perfect. And the point is like, why aren't we doing that with our own life? Like, why aren't we more consistent? John Maxwell, he said the key to all of his success is consistency.
mm-hmm,
Getting up, doing the same thing over and over, day in and day out. And, like, well, here, 2023 is coming,
yep,
and all these people in their mind, this is the year I'm going to take the 100 pounds off. Well, first of all, they don't even know how to build a habit because it's all a habit game.
mm-hmm,
Like, I'm a man of faith. But for years, I would never consistently get into the Word of God every day. But the last 6 months to a year, I've learned the power of a habit. Sometimes when you build a habit or you want to change something in your life, You can't do it like this big, massive project.
Nope.
You have to do 5 to 10 minutes. And maybe 10 minutes is even way too long. Maybe it's just that 5 minutes. So, you know what? Heck, I might get through a half a page in the Bible, but it's the daily consistency of getting in. There's a guy I was watching when I was studying, like, just people in the gym, and he literally for 6 months or a little bit longer, he'd go to the gym for 5 minutes. And
Really?
these people are like, what are you doing? Like, the bicep, like one bicep curl is not going to put muscle on you. And he just got really beat up, from those people. People started talking. And then when he finally built that habit in the subconscious,
Mm-hmm.
it went to like freaking work. But
Yep.
it took time. Every process requires time to build consistency. Another really cool thing that I love lately is principle number 17. Every effect has a cause, and every cause has effects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just think of that in this little story of this guy going to the gym 5 minutes a day for 6 months. Like, that was affecting others. And then when they started to see him turn around and he started to get toned and fit, the effects that not only they're like, dang, and then it changes their perspective. So where that goes even to where he works,
Yep.
like his whole environment. I don't know if you want to add into that.
Well, yeah, and it's your internal environment represents your external environment, and vice versa. Your external environment represents your internal environment. And it's you mentioned principle 17, but I think that principle 15 also comes into effect there, because no motion without the effort of force. You have to have effort, and that's the biggest part of the conversation is the effort that's required. The consistency, the routinely habit building. Andrew Huberman talks about, if you want to set a habit, then pick 6 things you want to do as daily habits, and you do that for 21 days. And then at the end of 21 days, you've tracked every day if you've accomplished that task. And then statistically, if you accomplish 1, 2, 3 of those in a high percentage, you then do a functional test day where you're not required, because you're no longer on a program. You do a functional test day to see if those habits did indeed make it into your subconscious, rather than you have to consciously program them. Oh, I have to go to the gym for 5 minutes, or I have to journal for 5 minutes, or I have to meditate for 5 minutes, or I got to walk the dog for 5 minutes, or I have to get up and brush my teeth for 5 minutes. Whatever that habit you're trying to create, the consistency that's required has to be based off of effort, and the intention behind the effort is absolutely crucial as well. So when you're setting goals, you have to be consistent, you have to be intentional, and you have to be willing to exert effort.
That's right.
Well, that's a great segue. Let's hear from our amazing sponsors that allow this podcast to happen. We're going to jump right back into this conversation.
Imaging Services' primary business is Chiropractic Solutions. With over 45 years in the industry of helping chiropractors, Michael Tokash offers free consultations on building your business. In the past year, Imaging Services has installed over 100 X-ray machines and digital X-ray systems in over 42 states across the United States. For more, head to theimagingservices.com.
Back, season 16, episode 11, Michael Smith. So we were just talking about consistency. We were talking about showing up, effort. We were talking a little about the principles and how those can tie to your everyday life. But, we were talking about value earlier, and the value that we create, right? What we prioritize, how we prioritize it. As a student, it is absolutely crucial to have good time management, because that transfers over into doctorhood. How well can you manage your time? How well, how many patients are you going to see in an hour? And you have to plan that out. If you're at a high volume practice, you may not be able to spend a lot of time with your patients. So you have to be a little more critical with the amount of time you spend with the patients. Otherwise, you're going to be there all day.
Right.
You know, that also relates into networking, building different relationships, or even doing lunch and learns, or setting up different types of appointments or interviews, or just doing things outside of the office or outside of your normal life. You have to have good time management. And you, like, I built that as a student going through school. You're in that regimented curriculum that creates consistency for you. If you don't set the time and the intention to study for your classes, to show up, to learn it and express it and apply it, then that's not a high priority. It means your values, you've created value on something else, and that's part of the process. People do fail classes in school. People will get degrees and they failed multiple classes. It's okay. That's part of the process. When you're talking about the journey, not the destination, it really is just, it's part of the process, and you have to be willing to be gracefully abundant and accept the truth, move forward, and put in the time and effort. And you know, uh, everything always starts with you. That was something that I adopted in school. Was I am the biggest catalyst in my life. How I do things, how I show up, will give me my results.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I feel like it's so important. It's not talked about enough. As a student, you should become very aware as you're going through school what habits you create, if they're healthy or not unhealthy, and then they will follow you as you become a doctor.
Yeah, and you talk about the habits part is like, and I think that's partially why I failed a couple classes is because I went 5 years and working in a career to then jumping into a doctor's program of like literally my school habits or school brain or whatever was like shut off for 5 years. And when
Yeah,
I was in high school, I graduated seventh out of my class, and like as a straight A student, boom, like so it was like school just came easy to me then. And then I come to Palmer and I'm like, holy crap, like I totally lost those habits, and for years, like I never had those type of habits of all right, this is when you study, this is when you do this, and then you go. That was high school, and then I was only in community college, and then I skipped university, and then I'm in grad school, and I don't know about you, like, but the university study habits to the grad school study habits are like absolutely like you can't explain them. Like your family will be like, uh, you need to get a job, and I'm like, you don't understand the the program of like it's literally like an 80 hour a week,
hmm
sometimes 100 hours a week to pass these classes,
yep,
and so the point I guess what I'm getting to is like this program of being at Palmer has taught me how to build habits, and and really to build consistency. Or not, I don't want to say that like a schedule. That's what it is.
yeah,
Of hey, this is like school time. This is fun time, and you know you learn how to. We all get 24 hours in a day, and you get to really learn how to use the most out of those 24 hours.
yeah, absolutely. In the doctor world, you plan, if you're, your partner, you got to plan your dates. You got to plan your massages. You got to plan time off. You got to, if you're going to go to the gym, how much time do I go to the gym? Because now I'm starting to eat up my free time that I could be focusing on, solidifying my doctor report, or, working on this, that, or the other. Or, you get patients that come in with different things. Like right now, I feel like the theme is vertigo. I have a bunch of patients with vertigo, and so I'm doing a bunch of diving into vertigo and different ways we can affect vertigo. And there's a ton of research out there, with chiropractic and vertigo. So it's really cool how now you can bring that to your patients, and you're spending your extra free time studying so you can show up stronger and better for your patients to serve the people.
Right. Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like, um, you know, doctors, isn't it like meaning like teacher, and then
Get
you
it?
know through that, like, it doesn't, the education never stops. Like, I think we join this profession and not realizing that, like, we're gonna have to do that kind of stuff the rest of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the cool thing: is like when you see results and you see people get well, you see sick people get well. Those tedious, researching papers or struggles, they get better. And in fact, as your clinic time increases, you begin to see a lot of stuff, and then it just becomes second nature. Oh yeah, I dealt with that. Do you kind of get what I'm saying? And then you've just built a habit and consistency of how to serve people.
Absolutely. And it's important to note, you know, as you do get more exposure, you get more experience, you start seeing different cases, and you see resolution in those cases. It's also extremely important to stay a beginner. Uh, as you learn things, you're going to think, oh, I know this now. I don't have to research it. I don't have to look into it any further. There's always, new research showing up to break some of the old myths. And it's just part of the job. You got to stay current on the modern day affairs, the research that's out there. Uh, you mentioned education, the philosophy, the green books. That's patient education. BJ's
Yeah.
writing about how to educate people on interference in the nervous system.
Yeah.
I mean, a subluxation, it really is that simple. There's a misalignment on the spine, putting pressure on nerve, ultimately causing malfunction in the body. Like, remove interference, body heals.
That's right. And I love that you kind of bring that up, because especially like a green book is like, sometimes people will think it's crazy to read the same book 10 times. They're just programmed to read 10 different books. But here's the difference is, like, after you've read it the 10th time, you see something that you never did the first time.
Mhm.
And so, like, when you get in green book stuff, you can look at that when you get into the Bible, or I guess essentially, it doesn't really matter what book it is, but as you read it and read it and read it and read it, not only it creates belief, but like, let's say green book philosophy, right? A lot of people say, oh, there's not philosophy, but it's like, you you saying that, you have your own philosophy.
Right.
And so the point is, like, specifically with green books, it's so important to read it and read it and read it, because it becomes you. Like, there's a verse in the Bible: "Give and it'll be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, runneth over, for the measure that you use, it'll be measured to you." The only reason I say that is because that's in me.
Mhm.
You know how many times I had to study it and study it and study it. And so when we get into our studies and study philosophy, and it's in you. So then when, specifically in the chiropractic world, when you have a medical approach that says the body's making mistakes, and then the chiropractic philosophy says, no, the body's actually adapting,
Mhm.
or this issue comes into your office, um, that philosophy, when it's in you, you have a set of lens to look through and say, hey, you know what? Hey, where is the body not adapting? You talk about nerve flow. Where is where's their nerve blockage, if you want to call it? And so, I don't know. That goes right back to consistently reading the same thing over and over and seeing it different.
Right. And it's, x-rays. I was just talking to one of my buddies that he's in practice at another office as well. And it, when you look at a person's x-ray and then you have them face down on the table, it's almost like you can see the x-ray on, like, in them as they're on the table. So when you're adjusting, sometimes you see the x-ray. And that's a part of the process. You look at enough X-rays whenever you palpate the spine and you look for the biosyncytial tonicity of the system, you'll be able to identify how the system is holding itself, as well as that still shot subluxation pattern that you have on X-ray. You use as a cross comparison analysis. This is a objective analysis. This is what we're working with. Then how is the body adapting to that state? And is it adapting? If it's not, then let's start putting some adaptation into the system.
Right.
It's
Yep.
it's a process. I'm excited for you, brother. The other side is brighter. It is greener, and it is absolutely worth all the effort that chiropractic school is.
Absolutely, and I guess as we come to a close, I just to whoever watches this, that don't quit. Like, there's a calling and a purpose over your life, and that you just have to believe that you can do it. Going out to school was absolutely one of the scariest things I ever did. I've never moved out of the state, and I'm just like, I remember driving on 94 in Michigan, and I'm like, I have no clue how I'm going to pay for chiropractic school. It's $60,000 a year, $20,000 to try, and I'm like, I have no clue how this is going to work. But I really remember it when the Lord said, "Hey, I didn't ask you to pay for it. I asked you to believe for it." Who? Let me say that again. He didn't ask me to pay for it. He asked me to believe for it. Who? So whatever you're doing in your life, Doc, whatever you're doing in your life, he didn't ask you to pay for it. He asked you to believe for it. He said he'll supply all your needs. How many? All. He said he'll supply them all. And especially when you get under the idea of this is a God project and I'm doing it for the kingdom of God. Like, he's going to take care of the finances. He's just wanting me to do what I'm doing here on this thing we call Earth, and spread that gospel. And I just get to do it through chiropractic. And so whatever you're dealing with, like, just you have to believe that it's possible. Believe the unbelievable, to receive the impossible, because with faith it is doable. A lot of people in our life today, like, they're too scared to believe the unbelievable, to take the risk. But I'm telling you, time and time again, when you just take the risk, it's amazing how on the other side it works out. I remember it was about a month, 2 months prior to coming out here to Palmer, and one of my mentors, he was going to charge me $7,000 for a coaching program. And he's like, Mike, you got to do it. You got to do it. And I'm like, bro, like, I'm about to go be broke in college. And he's just like, this is where it's going to set your, like, the way you think at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I'm not going to be able to come up with that.
Right.
He said, and I was sharing this with my father the other day. He said, when you mentally make the decision that you're going to do it, the money will show up, the financing will show up. And that comes back to that belief. If you just believe, and literally it was so crazy, mentally I said, all right, I'm doing program. I'm doing the coaching program. My family thought I was crazy. They're like, you just blew like $7,000. You'll never get it back. But I'll tell you what, it was like hitting the jackpot, because the way it trained my mind,
Mm-hmm.
the areas of my life, I was like, I didn't even know I was doing that.
Yep.
I didn't know I was thinking like that. And it took me out. It took me and put me in a bigger box. It took me out of the current box, if that makes sense. And so when you come back to your beliefs, believe the unbelievable, because it's doable. You just can't quit. I'm on this weight, getting healthy journey. 2013, I took 110 pounds off,
Yeah, you did.
and
You looked amazing. And you look amazing now.
Thank you. And over the course of the 8 years, like it was such a mental game. And really, it goes back to the belief of just doing the work. But the other day, I was just kind of sitting and I just said, because you have your ups and downs, as a bigger guy, as getting the weight off, because I have a significant amount of weight I need to lose, especially if I want to, be gold standard and be the definition of health for my patients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was just sitting there and I said, you've had some good years with your weight and your health, and you've had some bad years. You've had some good days, you've had some bad days. But over the course of everything, I never quit. That's where the power is. That's the power. Like when you don't quit, how many times I remember sitting in class, and first try at Palmer is one of the hardest trimesters of the whole curriculum. And I remember as we were getting to the end of the try, the class that was really big, and I think we had 150, 160, had went closer to 100.
Wow.
And people just, took exams and quit, and people, you know, uh, they just started dropping off. And sometimes that's okay because that's not what they were called to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have those people that they didn't have the thick skin to, hey, you know what? I failed a couple classes. Like, all right, I might as well just stop. But
Right.
when it's a God project, when it's a thing where it's like you're called to do it, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It's how determined you are.
It really is the determination. And, you know, we get caught, and I'm guilty of this because like one of my big things with patients is breaking patterns. Joe Dispenza talks about it. Um, Bruce Lipton talks about it. BJ talks about it. But it's thoughts, traumas, toxins. We have to start with the way we think, our mindset. The words we talk, the words we use, the words we choose to use, the projections. If you're not emotionally secure, you're going to project your emotions all over other people because you
Right.
don't know how to deal with your own emotions. And the journey in school, I went through my weight loss journey. I lost just under 100 pounds is where I'm sitting at right now. And that was from the beginning of COVID to now. And I can tell you, like, the emotional strains that came with the weight, the insecurity, the
Yeah.
feeling of just constant, uh, you're constantly feeling like you're going to be rejected because you're not the gold standard. Uh, but I'm here to tell you, you are exactly where you're supposed to be because you're on the journey right now. No matter where you are, everyone has a starting place. You have to have gratitude for where you are. You have to have grace for where you are. And you absolutely must be aware of where you are on your journey because if you don't have awareness, you won't have gratitude and you won't have grace for yourself. And then you're going to beat yourself up. And that's that's a trauma. You're
Yeah.
trauma. And I can say that from personal experience of the weight loss and moving through. I had braces as an adult through chiropractic school. I went bald through chiropractic school. And what else? I lost a bunch of weight in chiropractic school. So,
Yeah.
chiropractic school, it transforms you. It transforms you to be a better version of yourself so you can show up for people and truly serve them at your best.
And I like that because one of my mentors, he's a person that like he believes to be, do everything debt free and under budget. And you talk about the journey, like you've been on a similar journey as I is like, but what I'm getting to is like he was in he had car debt, he had house debt, he had his sofas, with the debt from Sears, and he had his coffee table on debt, or credit, whatever you want to call it, from Sears, and it was that point of he said, "I'm tired of being in debt,"
Mm-hmm.
and so he started with the coffee table, and he paid that coffee table off. And people came over, and he'd say, "I'd like you to meet my debt-free coffee table." But it was the point of reference. It was the idea of building a foundation, so then he can go somewhere with it.
Hmm.
And then the next day, people would, or next month, and people would come over, and he'd say, "Hey, I want you to see my debt-free couches." And they'd be like, "This is the stupidest thing." But he was building the belief system and the consistency that, hey, we're not living in this thing called debt the rest of our life. And then, of course, months would go by, and he had paid the car off. And then his friends, and he'd be like, "I want you to meet my debt-free car." And I adopted that. And I used to have a car note on my Jeep. It's a newer Jeep. And so it was pretty expensive. Before chiropractic school, I was like, I can't wait to say, meet my debt free Jeep.
Yes.
And so I had to do that. And I have a debt free Jeep. It's a beautiful car. It gets me anywhere I need to go. But it was the point of, hey, I want to live in freedom like that.
Mm.
And so that's where mine wasn't a coffee table, mine was my Jeep. But the point is, that can relate to any other aspects of life. Look at the weight loss. You just have to start with
Yep.
the belief. And when you believe that you can do it, I remember going home in between, I had failed biochem. For the second time, I had to pass biochem, or it was going to be a boot in grad school. But I remember listening to Dave Ramsey, and he had mentioned the quote: "If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." And that was Henry Ford, I believe.
Mm.
And and the point is, like, that goes back to belief. And I remember every day saying that to myself, looking in the mirror. If you think you can pass biochem, or you think you can't, you're right. And so every single day, I had to say, I believe I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. There were days where I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And then I just pushed in. And those were the best days, because that's when I grew the most. But it's just so cool. And I'm just thankful to be able to just share part of my story. Um, but don't quit. It's so much. Life is fun. Um,
Yes.
it's fun when you take a risk and you see the rewards of taking risks too.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite sayings is "believe to achieve." You have to believe it to achieve it, and if you don't believe it, you won't achieve it. So, on that note, Mike, how do we find you? If people have questions for you, people want to connect to you. Do we have any students out there at Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport? How do we find you? How do we get connected to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way is on my Instagram, and that simply is Michael Smith official page.
Michael Smith official page, and that is spelled Michael, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Awesome, dude. Mike, it's been such an honor and privilege to have you on the show. I learned a lot, for myself. It's always we are mirrors of each other. We're always learning. We're always growing.
Yep.
Grateful to have you on this path in life. I'm grateful to have you in this profession. It is a beautiful profession that we truly have the potential to change humanity, and I consider what's the template of healthcare here in the world. But we shall
That's
see.
right. Absolutely. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And literally, guys, believe the unbelievable to receive the impossible, because with faith, it is doable. Take care, and God bless.
Catch y'all next time on the Legendary Chiropractor Podcast. We will have a couple of sponsor episodes this week, and then we have a season recap next weekend. This is Dr. Brent. I will see you guys next time.